Good evening and warm welcome to all of you. Today, one of the special day for us, particularly for the long timers in the Rodham library, because it is the fields and currently in government lecture series, into which Rukmini is going to give this wonderful lecture today. We're going to open data. Sankalingam, for those of you who do not know, and also for some of the newcomers, like to say a few words about him. Sankalingam was the first director of the Rosa Muthiah Library, and he was the director for 3.5 years, and it was premature that when we lost him, and he had a heart attack. He was a visionary teacher, leader, and person who taught at the University of Madras in the Department of Library and Information Science. For several years, he passed out of the University of Mysore to the Library and Information degree, and he also worked as an assistant librarian. Really, medical college, which he joined the University of Madras. The University of Madras was kind of a lead period for him to join as the first director of the Rosa Muthiah Research Library when it was formed in the year 1994 by the University of Chicago. Some of you may know the history of the library, but for those who do not know about it, the Rosa Muthiah Research Library collection was part of a single man initiative in the beginning. In his lifetime, Rosa Muthiah collected about 100,000 items, and he died in the year 1990. He left behind this good collection, an eclectic range of collection of books, periodicals, ephemera, material, like drama, posters, and wedding invitations, and so on. The University of Chicago understood the significance of the collection, and they moved quickly to purchase the collection to the family, and they raised money from different agencies globally, both to purchase the collection, but also to partly preserve it. After which, in 1894, the entire collection was moved to China. It was housed in a remote place in Motherwell. Those days, at least, is very remote. So we were functioning in that area. We moved this building in 2005. So Mr. Sankalingam will be more initiatives for it. So for it was very dear to it. And the library was used as a sort of a platform to develop interesting library practices, information practices, and which is developed in different institutions later. So he, along with Professor Raghavan and other colleagues, were pioneers in that sort of experimentation. And Rosa Muthiah was so fortunate that he became the first director. And his guidance, a few of us continue to remember him, and he was such a fine teacher, not just at the university, but also a lot of people in the library considered him as a teacher. I never formally studied in the university setup under him, but for me, he was a wonderful teacher, a good friend, and we wanted to continue his legacy, and we have taken so far, and I hope we will take further heights with what we have been doing. And today, the family of and doing this with us in the center month. And I welcome her and all for this evening lecture. This is the third lecture in this series. We hope to have more and more lectures related to data science and information science. And also this particular we have selected this book and author because this is an evidence-based research. And I would like to invite my colleague, Mr. A. Panel, who is the head of the Center of Studying Public Sphere, part of the Relevant Affairs Society, to formally introduce the speaker of this evening.
Thank you so much. See, journalism is generally assumed as two track in the one track is called bearing witness, another track is called making sense. Data journalism is one place where we find this melody of bearing witness and making sense. And part of the aspect in the data journalism is that how much of numbers we are going to take it on its plain pattern, and how much of the numbers we are going to subject to a critical analysis. And what are the tools we are going to use to understand the integrity of numbers? Because I can use numbers to fudge anything, or I can use numbers to explain something. Am I using numbers for explaining, or I'm using numbers to evade? That's a key question when we look at numbers. And that's the reason the role of a data journalist is to explain the importance of context. And that's the reason Rukmini's book, which is Whole Numbers and Our Truths, deals with the importance of context. We are working with Rukmini on a new project. She has just filed a report. It's on the COVID numbers. We are looking at the COVID numbers of two countries, Nepal and India, and what happened to the COVID numbers? Was a key question because that had to look at the integrity of the institutional arrangement in generating numbers. But at some level, we need to know what are the yardsticks which various institutions use to measure numbers. For instance, we have something called the GDP, and the GDP also comes with the idea of a base year. But the recent years, we know that the base year was changed thrice so that the GDP number looks good, which means we should know where the manipulation of numbers start. But to understand the integrity of numbers, we need to understand the context. And I don't think there's a better person than Rukmini to explain the importance of the context. And he also looks at the numbers not purely in terms of larger policy issues like vaccine or educational institutions. She also looks at numbers with reference to law and marriage. That's the reason it's so important that the way numbers impact our life, both at a macro level as well as a personal, individual level. Thank you, Rukmini. And by the way, Rukmini's next book has a very, very interesting title. It's called How to Talk to Your WhatsApp Uncle and Other Essential Tools for Survival. Because that book is fine book to fight against disinformation balance for your work in profit today. Yes.
During my talk, and we were serious. When I was told I'm speaking down with students today, I was very happy, and I used this as an opportunity to be to see some of my references it's not one of my serious talks. So the people who were expecting a more serious talk, so my apologies, like, I will be speaking in English throughout, but I'm happy to take questions in the end. So particularly if something was not clear, please, feel free to ask me one question in the end. And Mr. Banita will kindly introduce me. I'm a data journalist now in Chennai. This is my most recent book. I write independently for a number of publications, and my work focuses on gender inequality, politics, caste, crime, and health in the last couple of years in particular. This was the first book I'm working on, the second book. I'm happy to talk about that later as well. Should I be continuing? Awesome. Okay, just to, I would like to present as if this very illegible slide is illegible on purpose because there are many people who are in that book. But this is the one-line page of my book, just to tell you that what the book tries to do is I'm trying to answer 10 big questions about how things work in modern India through a combination of what the data can tell you, what the good data can tell you, and we can talk a little bit more about how do we figure out what is good data, as well as what the data misses or gets wrong or misleads on. So these questions include things like how polls and cookie statistics work, as well as how questions around the economy work, as well as around health, which I look at in the last chapter. So one of the things I want to tell you right at the beginning is I have no background in maths, stats, politics, economics, anything of any use. I didn't study anything particularly useful. I came to this much later, and most of it I learned on the job. So most people think that data journalism is involves a lot of complicated statistics and a lot of complicated statistical ability. I will say particularly to students that if you can pick up statistical tools, that will be a great, added advantage to you. So don't necessarily follow the path that I did, which was to learn on the job. Pick up the skills that you can, but even if you can't, don't let data intimidate you. Don't assume that because you are good at advanced maths or statistics, you cannot deal with numbers. The point that I want to make is that a lot of work with Indian data largely involves hard work, spending a lot of time figuring those numbers out, logic, just trying to understand the logic of it, and extra legwork to figure out what those mean, as well as field work, which is something that many of the students will be learning to do it better. So this is what my job actually looks a lot like. One of the big parts of working with Indian data is dealing with just how difficult it is to access that data. Now, parts of it are getting better, but we have an example from colleague Avinash Celestine, who now runs an excellent website called allindialives.com, which you should have looked at. We are used to finding data in formats like PDFs, which are very difficult to use. Here, Avinash was looking for some numbers from Karnataka. I was very excited to find an Excel, and we went and clicked on it and found that it was actually an image of an Excel that had been pasted into the Excel sheet. So there's absolutely nothing you could do with the data that when it's exciting, it immediately does. This is a data journalist at the Washington Post, the one that I who said that something that all of us experience, which is we know that government data was put together by compiling Excel sheets, by compiling raw data, but it will be put out in PDFs when it's given out. So you feel like most of your job is asking the government to give you back the data that it was already originally in which format it was in. And additionally, because this is India, another big part of my job is trying to get it from the phone. So all of this is not glamorous advanced statistics, it's the sort of legwork, the sort of unglamorous work that you would associate with all sorts of research. So two takeaways: don't think that numbers are only for those who have advanced statistical abilities, and two, don't think that data journalism means sitting in front of a laptop and that's it. It involves a lot of these standard research and journalistic practices as well. So there's 5 big points I want to touch upon today. these are the points broadly, and we'll come to them one by one with some examples. The first point that I wanted to make was that people often come across instances where you don't have data, you don't have the data you need. But I would encourage people not to start with the sense that there is no good data about India in India or India. That is sometimes I worry the feeling that you end up developing among a lot of young people who feel that Indian data is in such bad shape that there's nothing you can do with it, and it's useless, and it's all manipulated, and it's all fake, and it's not working in Indian data. So I'm here to say that that's wrong. Let's talk about what good data is, and let's figure out how to work with that good data. And one of the reasons we do have a lot of good data is in part because of these two men. History is not the story of great men alone, and the history of Indian statistics is not the story of these two men alone. But when you made an outside goal in why India's statistics still stand in pretty good shape. This is an area who were so committed to the notion of statistics as an essential tool of planning, and planning as a way to get to being, as a way to bring about development, that they put in place a statistical architecture at the time of independence that was far in advance of what such a poor country and what such an underdeveloped country should have been even daring to dream of at the time. It was not in any way aligned with where we were, but that was the sort of audacity of what was it actually, what they did. So, we talk about the Netflix series, about the movies, about ISRO. I think there could be a great Netflix series, maybe not a Netflix series, but there should be some great documentation of the audacity of thinking about putting in place, for example, the world's first and largest representative household sample survey, which is what we had at the time. We had delegations visiting across not just the newly decolonized world, but the world as well, to see what India was putting in place and what they could learn. Many of those systems have stood the test of time. One of the reasons we have the national sample survey still delivering at an impressive amount of data is because of the architecture that was put in place. Was it perfect? No. Is it standing in perfect shape? And does it mean that we don't need to do any work, either statistical or democratic, around it to keep it working as well? No. But let's acknowledge that there is good data and it has in part to do with the history of how the systems were put in place. So why I think numbers are important are for a few reasons. All of us live within worlds where we sometimes lose sense of what reality truly looks like. So, for example, Indian data, official Indian data shows us that in 2017-18, so think back to 2017-18, where you were roughly 5 years ago. If you spent more than 8,500 rupees in a month, you were in the top 5% of urban India. So these are the sorts of reality checks that come from official Indian data, which makes it valuable to continue looking at data, and then of course to advocate for that data to continue to be collected and released. There are some other important reality checks that come from big government sources. For example, many of us have the feeling that in our friends and family groups, there is so much intercaste marriage that we sort of assume that that's now become norm, that, the strict rules of endowment are something of the past. But the share of Indians who in their 20s now in an intercaste marriage is no different from the share of Indians in their 90s who had intercaste marriage. It's virtually unchanged across Indian independence so far. Intercaste marriage remains under 5%, extremely uncommon, and something that perhaps not a lot of us would sense if we were to live by anecdotes or rumors around us. The other reason that I think that it's important to look at big, big sources of data and the insights that can come out of it is that sometimes narratives develop over time that have no basis in data, but take such a hold of the public imagination that they become almost fact. So this is a picture from Hindi movie that was very popular in the 1970s called 1970s called Amar Akbar Andin. And the key thing that you need to know about it is as the name sounds, the three characters, one is Hindu, one is Muslim, one is Christian, and I can't remember if they turn out to be brothers or not, but there's something, it's the shorthand for communal harmony. And then it's being this sort of liberal fantasy that has existed now for decades, that the majority of India is essentially progressive, secular, tolerant, and there is a fringe minority that doesn't want intermixing between groups, doesn't want intermarriage between groups. The data for a long time has shown us that that's simply not true. However, public narrative didn't catch up with it until I would say just a few years ago, when it became almost impossible to deny that that was the Indian reality. So that was another thing that I was saying. It can force you to re-examine narratives that have taken the role of fact without having ever been based in fact. Then the point that I often like to make to younger people, and especially to privileged younger people, is that the world that we operate in are bubbles. And we often think of misinformation bubbles. So we think of our uncle who swallows disinformation on a WhatsApp group as living in a bubble. But all of us live in our own bubbles as well. And what data can often do is to help us break out of those bubbles and see what the larger Indian reality looks like. Journalists and researchers sometimes see numbers as being disconnected from the truth, and field work or field reporting as being the real truth. And I actually, would like to push back against that notion, because I think that a narrow vision, and especially choosing what you want to look at, can sometimes make you continue to operate in this bubble. So that was my first point, that India does have a lot of big data, and afterwards or in the conversation that we have to talk to students about what are some of the important sources of data, how can we use them, how can we think about them, key Indian and private sources that are widely available. My second point is that this data is there, but it needs a lot of context to understand or present or talk about. And if we don't use that full context, we end up creating extremely misleading pictures. So one of the consistent problems with making interstate comparisons in India, and we see this with crime reporting, but we also saw it with COVID, and we see it in many other instances, is that you're never quite sure if what you're picking up is actual differences between the states, or what you're picking up is the difference in that state's ability to report something better. So that was certainly the case with COVID, and we can talk about that in a bit, but I think it's an important point when it comes to science. So if you look at this chart, we don't need to look closely and say broadly what it looks like. On the horizontal axis, you have crimes against women as reported to the police. So this is police statistics. It comes from the NCRB. This is what we usually see in headlines. When you talk about crimes against women and you see numbers, this is what you see, right? Police statistics. So this is normalized for population. So those are in states, and you see violence against women as reported to the police proportionate to population. And on the right, towards the extreme right, are the states that report the highest violence against women proportionate to population. And of course, you see Delhi. So then you feel that, oh, all the headlines you see around Delhi being said, right? It has the highest reported violence against women. However, on the vertical axis, you have the violence that women say that they actually experience when they speak to household surveys. So this comes from the National Family Household Survey, National Family Health Survey, which among other things asks women about the actual experience of violence. So that is the actual, let's say, actual, we shouldn't call it actual, it's what they're telling surveyors. There's still no way of knowing the actual numbers. And if you look at the two together, there's a complicated picture that emerges. So on the bottom right, Delhi, for example, is the state that reports the highest levels of violence for police. However, it's among the states where women tell household surveys that they experience the lowest levels of violence. This means that most, or rather, a large part of the violence that they experience is being reported to the police. The states that really worry me are both in the top left corner, and that includes Bihar, for example. These are the states with the lowest levels of crimes reported to the police, but the highest levels that women say they actually experience. So it's an intersection of forces that are truly problematic because it means high experience of crime and no reporting to the police. Now, if you relied on police statistics alone, and certainly if you went by newspaper headlines, you would not even get demand any attention. You would think that all of your attention needs to be concentrated in the bottom right corner. So this is where adding context, typically, especially by using multiple data sources and using them to triangulate, putting them together and see what they produce, becomes extremely important. And this is one source reporting that the news media relies on creates really problematic narratives. So when you look at police statistics alone, these are the sorts of headlines that we look. Now, it doesn't take too much thinking, and even people don't to say that it's very likely that the reason that cities in Kerala and the state of Kerala report the highest levels of crime or violence against women is because any one of these factors or a combination of them, which is women being more empowered to report it, the police are more likely to actually register it. All of these are at play without taking them into account. If you go to these sorts of headlines alone, you do serious damage to our understanding of women's agency, violence, interpersonal relationships, all of which I think have gone in a problematic direction in the last 10 years, and we've been having this heightened conversation around violence against women, which exists, but exists in forms that perhaps we're not talking enough about. So one of the things that I set out to do when I realized that these sorts of newspaper headlines were not getting very far was to try and think what could I do beyond this. So my experience as a field reporter, and perhaps your experiences as field researchers will have shown you, for example, that you know what goes on in a police station. So you feel that relying upon police statistics is a bad idea. There's so much that goes on, we shouldn't trust police statistics alone. So what can you do? So what I decided to do was to look at one calendar year of court cases in Delhi, because court cases give you that much more documentation. I could attend some of the trials, I could speak to judges, prosecutors, families on both sides. And so I began to put it together in this sort of spreadsheet by reading all of those judgments. And what I ended up finding was this: it's not very legible, but let me explain it. In 1 year of cases that I looked at, which was 600 cases around, the largest share of cases that were being that had come under IPC 376, which is sexual assault, were actually consenting relationships between couples against whom parents had filed cases. These were often intercaste and intertribal couples. They had often eloped, sometimes they were already married, sometimes they already had children. But parents were opposed to it, and so they had filed these cases. This was the largest share, and the sort of stranger assaults, the sort that get a lot of media attention, and the sort that make us also frightened, because when we read about it, we feel like, oh no, this is so unsafe, I shouldn't think about to go anywhere. Those were there were 12 out of 600 in that year that had in which the perpetrator was unknown to the victim. So this sort of combination of two sets of statistics, this way of going beyond police statistics, marrying of quantitative and qualitative can produce these sorts of heightened understanding beyond what immediate statistics are interested in. Beyond time, my third one. So my second point was that Indian data does need a lot of context. But the combination of these first 2 points should not be taken to mean that Indian data does not have any problems. Let's not assume that Indian data is perfect, covers everything, gets everything right. No, there's still a lot of issues on that. So let me give you one more example from crime before moving to something else. In 2012, I lived in Delhi at the time, and because of the assault on a young woman in Delhi, there was a lot of reporting around it. And I ended up spending a lot of time in the National Crime Records Bureau office, sort of trying to understand how the systems work. And this is something I would encourage you to do, even if you're not hanging around in that office. Trying to understand how numbers are produced is extremely important. In my view, one of the largest reasons that people do not trust numbers or we are not able to create credibility around these numbers simply because we don't explain how they were collected. So it's easy for people to feel 8,500 rupees a month, that's impossible. Surely you would not sample the rich, the rich make a lot of money with that amount. And why is that the case? Because I have not explained to you how the numbers were collected. So understanding how the numbers were collected first, and then being able to explain it well, should be an essential part of what all of us do. So because I was hanging around the NCRB office, I was trying to understand how crimes were classified, how they fit in the NCRB's numbers. So I said to the official there, okay, so this crime that just happened, it would go in the NCRB annual statistics as sexual assault, right? He said, no, actually, no, because it was murder. And that made no sense to me. So what he ended up explaining to me was that India follows what's called the principal offense rule, which is in an FIR, if there are more than one section, only the section which carries the highest possible sentence will be included in the sentence. So if you left your phone in your car and somebody broke into your car, took your phone out, and then passed you on their way out, the FIR might include phone theft, it might include some sections include for the police statistics will only count it as whichever of the sections carries the maximum possible sentence. What this means is that we are undercounting every crime in India except probably murder, which carries the highest possible sentence. This is not a particularly bad or evil thing in India. There are other countries that do it as well. This principle of rule is something that's followed by others. But we never explained it to people. NCRB statistics never included it in their disclaimers and presentations that this is what they do, so people didn't know about it. They included it in their disclaimer now. Another sort of interesting one which comes from not collecting data in the way that it's needed is, for example, the census. Now, when the next census will come out is another question, but the census data that we've had so far, the occupational categories, what jobs we do is agriculture, home-based artisan, and others. Now that others has grown over time to become a huge share of the Indian workforce. And by continuing to call it others, we are essentially missing almost all numbers from the census about India's workforce. Another sort of interesting miss about the workforce comes from the NSS. So we have something called the National Classification of Occupations. And in that, there's one code that is CEOs and chief executives and directors. Now, in India's official workforce statistics, this is the most common occupational category for women, and the third most common occupational category for men. Now, this makes no sense. I mean, either it makes no sense, or you keep this country is teeming with CEOs, everybody is doing a startup, that must be why they're associated there. But if you go further into the numbers, you find that this is the term used by someone, even if they are running a one-person enterprise. So your samosa wala is called the CEO and director of his own enterprise. And of the women, the majority of them were doing unpaid family work. They were unpaid helpers on their husbands' enterprises and were being called CEOs and directors in the classification. Again, this was not an attempt to lie. This was not an attempt to inflate numbers. This is a sort of legacy way of classifying numbers without much additional thought that has continued for decades. And nobody's had a moment of stopping and saying, why are we doing this? We're getting things wrong. So I want to bring my fourth and fifth points sort of together by talking a little bit about code. My fourth point was that, in my view, outright manipulation of data is a smaller problem than it is in many people's minds. After every talk, that is the number one question I get asked. Can we trust any number? Are they all fun? Are they all made up? Are they all manipulated? Can we trust any of it? Now, the reason I push back against that is not because I have some touching faith in the government, but because there are systems that exist, supervisory systems that continue to function. So they all function as well as they should. Should we have better systems? Should we have an autonomous body on the lines of the UK's National Office of Statistics? Yes, we should. Should we have something like the US Congress Budget Office that is independent, non-partisan, often end up criticizing budgetary allocations just by putting out the correct numbers or goes against what someone in power is arguing? Yes, we should have all of these individual institutions, ideally with legal backing so that they can't, you can't have a National Statistical Commission right now, which is actually it's in better shape right now, but it was headless and nebulous for a couple of years in the field. So yes, all of the supervisory and another important check is the media, which I continue to believe has played an extremely important role. A lot of the essential COVID work came from the mainstream media. All that we know about prepaid official statistics or withdrawn official statistics like those from the NSSO came from media. This work in written standard, for example. So I believe that these systems, though under pressure, are working. From the evidence I see, when there are problems with the numbers, it comes to light. We do know what happened in the NSL. So it's widely discussed. We have a rich tradition of huge debate around statistics. It happens in the op-ed pages of the Hindu and the Indian Express. It happens in the EPW. It happens in conferences all over the world. There is a huge number of people being very close attention to statistics. There has been, we had this household consumption survey, which was first ready, but then withdrawn. Apparently, because the numbers were, not positive. So now we have a new household survey. The methodology has changed, but we know all of this. We know that the methodology has changed. We know what that changes. It has been pointed out. It has been pointed out by journalists. It will be widely written about when it appears by economists and others. So there are certainly problems with delayed data, with missing data, with data that isn't connected, with data that is presented to show one side or the other. But it's not happening, but it is coming back. So I believe that manipulation of numbers occupies far greater space in people's minds than we have reason to believe. Of course, this is my opinion, and we can debate this. This is sort of my assessment. I'm going to bring the both of you point together. The point was that one big silver lining in India is that communities that try and bring together data for completely non-partisan purposes are developing. And for all of you, particularly students, there is now greater ability to access data than there has been, despite all of these things that I'm pointing out. And then I'll tell you about some of these resources. So I'm going to bring these 2 points together to talk about the story with COVID. First, let's talk about the fact that India still does not have an official website that puts together district level COVID data, simply cases, deaths from across the country, put it up on a website available to everyone. For reasons that are not apparent to me, it was never put together. We have state level data on the ministry website. Every state would put out its own state bulletins. The district numbers were there. The government did not put it together. So it came to people to do it, and very early in the pandemic, by March 2020, a completely anonymous volunteer group came together to put together this wonderful website that is called COVID-19india.org. There have been a couple of successors, and now those successors are winding down as well because many states do not put out bulletins anymore. They shifted their resources to other diseases. So, in some ways that brings together both my both and good points. Did the numbers exist? Was the government collecting them? Yes. Were they manipulating and hiding them? No, the states were putting the bulletins out, but access was not being granted or not being given easily. So people stepped in. Another great example is when I was talking a little bit about COVID deaths is this early attempt from Kerala. So what was happening with COVID deaths? All of us knew from talking to friends and family that there were people dying of COVID who were not making into the numbers, right? We knew this was happening. Some never got a test, some were never in the hospital bed, some people never got death certificate that mentioned we all knew this was happening. A group of doctors in Kerala who knew their local communities very well, knew this was happening, All they did is they put together a Google spreadsheet, nothing fancy. They put together a Google spreadsheet, they would go through all the obituaries and ads every day in the Kerala media, the vast Kerala media, and they would take these names out, they would put them on one side. Then the Kerala official government bulletin would put names on the They would check the two and say, did this person's name make it? No, did it cross? This person's name? Okay, Kerala government has accepted it. That's it. That was their way of checking, and that was their way of producing what their version of undercount. Right? If so many people never make it to the official bulletin, then people will call it an undercount. So that was their, citizen driven effort at bringing some accountability on both numbers. A lot of the early and hardest work happened in non-big cities by non-English journalists, for whom the pressures are greater, the risks are greater, and the rewards much smaller. So journalists in small cities in UP, in Gujarat, were some of the earliest ones who did work like this. They would go to hospitals, or they would go to crematorium. They would pull out registers that look like this, look at the names over there, compare it to the official bulletin, and say, look, this is clear discharge going on. This is difficult work when you're in a non-English newsroom in a small city, in a newsroom there's a line of government ads. But I create personal profession because many journalists that I did this. So just to wind up the COVID point, if we talk about the undercounting of COVID deaths, there is a whole host of reasons, many of which are legacy reasons around the way we count deaths from disease that account for virus patterns. Let me give you one example. The WHO says that by the end of summer 2021, India had 5 million deaths from COVID. And the Indian government says there were 500,000. Right? So that is a 10 times underestimate. And that seems like something very shocking, and then it became an international incident and became a big deal. In 2017, the last time we had this official data, the government's official death toll from malaria was 190 deaths, while modern estimates similar to what the WHO did for COVID by others put this number at 50,000. So that is a 40 times underestimate. That didn't get any newspaper attention. That didn't get any international incidents. So sure, there are specific reasons, there are specific problems that happened during the pandemic, and the numbers were so huge that administrative systems were overwhelmed. Perhaps there was active suppression in some cases. I don't know, but it's important to think of these things in a continuum. We have not yet got to a place where we accurately count deaths from diseases, and COVID fits within that continuum perfectly. So to immediately attribute malpractice and active suppression to things that have happened historically and have happened in all other contexts is just something I don't instantly gravitate. I'd rather see the broader sort of background of the script. So that's my broad point about COVID. That's my broad point about manipulation of numbers and about what I see like silver lining, which is groups coming together in open data tables. So I would highly recommend you working with data. Google Meet, so a Google group. You can join the Google group. It's got a data Meet. They have existed for 10 years now. It is just a big community of people exclusively interested in sharing data sets that someone wants. You go to data Meet, first people search to see if somebody has already shared it, or you post your question and say, the district boundaries in Telangana have changed, and I'm trying to do this work and I don't know how to map it. At the end of the day, someone will have got back to you. I was doing this work, I found this data set here, it's on this government website, and I've sent you a link. So this very generous, collaborative, open data community in India is a big silver lining. The last point I want to make is that communicating data is always a challenge. In my early days in data journalism, I used to be very irritated when editors told me, don't begin a story with the number. It puts people off. And I used to feel, why? If I explain it well, or if the number is important, people should be able to take it. I can't say that I have moved the other way as well. Sometimes I don't think that the number is the right way to start with, but I now recognize that many people have difficulty dealing with numbers. Part of this is we teach maths very poorly in our schools. And this means that people, particularly from marginalized background as well as women, grow up with the fear of numbers. Now, if there are ways that we can help get past this barrier to make our point, if we believe our point is important, and so getting people to understand these numbers is important, then we have to think more creatively about how to make these numbers more accessible. This doesn't involve dumbing down, this doesn't involve following the same set pattern. Sometimes people will think right in this way. You don't need to follow those rules, you can come up with it yourself. But taking that extra step to make numbers accessible to people is an important part of my job and the job when we work with numbers. Just to give you an example of that, the common trope that's used is start with a story. And I used to always be very irritated by this. And one of the things I found in my book being now, for example, is that there's definitely a set of people for whom the numbers is what sticks with them. But there is a huge set of people who found the story is most interesting in it. And if the stories is what drew them to looking at the numbers, then that's important as well. So a long time ago, I saw this painting by the Indian painter Amrita Shetty on the left, and I saw a storyteller. And there's an older man, a Tata, who seems to be telling stories while there's cooking. And it struck me so much that this love of stories is universal. It's there among children, it's there among older people. The picture on the right is my brother and me listening to my grandfather's story. And the whole pose, the whole open-eyed staring at it is so similar. This is universal. The love of stories and the engagement that comes from well-told stories is universal. And it's a skill worth working on and worth mastering. So that's my talk, and I'll be happy to take questions. Your questions don't have to be with what is in the docket. Please feel free to show me on that. And I would encourage everyone to give students the first chance to ask questions. I don't speak Tamil, but I understand Tamil. So you are very welcome to ask a question in Tamil as well. I understand Tamil. Students' first chance is here. If you first chance for students. Then the mic will pass to older people and it won't come back to you. You know that.
Extra biology, like bedtime storyteller. Can you tell us anything?
It's bedtime story. You have to go to sleep. So let me tell you the story from the book. It's not a bedtime story. The reason I'm a bedtime story teller in that is because I have small children. So all of my training in what stories comes from trying to prevent children's attention. Let me tell you a story that's not a bedtime story, but that's in the book. And please feel free to ask absolutely anything. So in the book, I have a chapter that is around love and marriage, right? And it looks a lot around intercaste, or rather the absence of intercaste marriage, because that's what the numbers show. So there's a young man I speak to in the book who's in an intercaste relationship with a young man from Maharashtra. And at the end of the chapter, I go back to him and say, look at the numbers, look how rare intercaste marriages. Doesn't that make you feel like an exception, like an outlier, like you're so out of the ordinary? And he told me, no, but that's your data is about marriage. It's not about love. He said there are a lot of people in that relationships in India who can't make that leap into marriage. But that doesn't mean that there isn't intercaste love. I don't know. We don't have. See, this is one of the areas in which data is lacking. We don't ask questions about relationships. We only ask questions about marriage in India. But that really made me think that perhaps what the numbers are missing is things that do not get to that final stage, but in the middle, maybe there are revolutions on the margins that the numbers will capture. So that's my difference.
Hello, my name is Bharati. I'm from the National Museum. So I take care of social media marketing there, but surprisingly, I was interested in finding out how visitors come and meet the museum. What they take away from the museum. So we had a feedback survey, and then we collected data on it, and then we had to present it to our directors to say what is right and what's wrong, and how do we do any changes. So when we made the feedback form, we had in mind some questions that we thought were important. To kind of like, okay, how did you come to the museum? What did you like? What did you understand? Or what did you take back? Or you move forward and tell about everybody in your life about the museum. And when we got responses back, we understood that the museum, when we did the survey, there was majority of young people doing, responding to survey, actually doing the report and giving us input on it. And so therefore, the data that we collected, it is representing that the people who come to the museum are more youngsters in comparison to older people. Even though it might be, let's say, a huge family coming in, but the person doing the survey is one person. So when you're presenting the data, we are presenting the way it's saying that, okay, youngsters are coming to me, it's more in comparison to people. But how do we correct something like this?
Great question. And there are many surveys that would benefit from more thinking of this sort, because they are similarly, falling into sampling errors and sampling bias that they simply not have about. So there are two things. There is a universe and there is a sample, right? So in your case, your universe is everyone who comes to the museum, but the sample is the people who answer the survey. And understanding how well or poorly that sample represents the universe should be step one of surveying. So there is a need to understand the universe of people coming with it. You might need to put a physical form over here that everybody needs to build. I'm not encouraging data mining over here, but that is how you would get a sense of what that universe is. And then if you find that your sample is particularly younger than your universe, more online, maybe more male, maybe more men are using social media tools and so willing to answer this. And then you have to call that out very clearly in your presentation. What big surveyors would do is they would do sample weighting. So if your sample has too many men and too women, they would give women's answers a greater weight so that they better represent the overall human. You potentially don't need to get into all of that here, but yes, you do need to start from understanding the universe before you get to the sample, otherwise you're not going to be able to correct this. And this is actually one of the reasons why the missing census becomes so important. So many people say, but we have so many sample surveys, why do we need the census? The census is what India's universe is that allows us to create samples. If you don't know what the universe looks like, you don't know if the sample is representative or not. So either correcting for it or being very upfront in your presentation. So whenever people conduct online surveys, they need to be very clear that it's an online survey. Maybe if they have a methodology paragraph that says India's implementing users are more likely to be rich, name, upper class, middle.
Since you mentioned about census in the response, so my question is, don't you think that state of EK has India's like statistic institutions, especially like since I'm raising this question because 2019 this definitely can come. So this is what like was the attention. I mean, he is about to actually like argue that there should be better standards to be set up. So he signed on the country. So this recommendation take on.
Yes, there is a DP in India's statistical system. In many ways, it predates the current movement. So there is an excellent series about India's statistical system. by the then data editor from the compiler, in which he sort of lays out the beginning of the end, not the end, but the beginning of the decay. So one of the big problem areas and one of the areas of decay has been just how slow we have been to digitize. Despite the fact that Mohammed of this had this obsession with bringing a computer way back then in the 50s, and there was like a race to bring the first computer to India. He wanted it outside, he didn't go to outside. But 50, 60 years later, we took very long to get to digitization. So that is about 10, 20 years story. Another thing that happened is we did not hire enough people. We needed more people in integrators. We moved to part-time integrators to save money. And arguably that has led to an actual problems with the findings. So some India has a very low female workforce participation rate, and there are many reasons, including the social norms, including lack of decent work, wages, all of that. But one of the points that economists have pointed out is that we do a poor job of asking the right question that will elicit the right answer. Because women sometimes don't think of their role as paid work. They think of it as like management and shop or something like that. It's actually productive economic work. And the argument is that if we had better trained educators, potentially full-time educators, we wouldn't be having this problem. That's one theory. What we've certainly had now is a couple of breaks in the past. One is, particularly in the case of the 2017-18 household consumption expenditure survey, which was the first time in India that an SSO survey was ready for release, but then withdrawn and not released at all. That was one of the points that PC Mohan spoke out about with his final exit was over the GDP calculations. I think what we've also had simultaneously is a real reduction in demographic mobilization around this, as well as in opposition to it. So the fact that the census is very delayed, the fact that these NSSO reports, some are delayed, some are withdrawn, I don't think there's been any, big noise about it. I don't think a lot of politicians have made a big issue on it. I don't think it's been raised in Parliament much. It's been pointed out by some newspapers, but I don't think it's been taken up in big way. We have, more than 1 year of health data from the National Health Mission's administrative database that's not been published for more than a year. It used to be published monthly around immunizations and everything. Nothing, never been taken up in Parliament, never seen them done as a prime time debate. So yes, the decay began in the beginning, and the opposition to it, or the sort of mass utilization around it, I don't see any evidence. Perhaps it's a failure of people communicating with that we've not made it seem as important as it should be, but that is a failure that we've not got it. Enough people care about it.
I work for the government of Tamil Nadu. I have a question. There's most of the data that we are collecting in the census or any other day-to-day report that we are generating is collected by the lowest level of bureaucracy that we have, maybe several group workers, another body workers, teachers. And we are taking Google Sheets on a day-to-day basis. So how do you think we can better collect data and improve the quality of data? Also, how can we get better access?
Could you repeat?
Yeah.
What is the Google Sheets part of that?
No, we are collecting data in Google Sheets on a day-to-day basis, and most of the data comes from lower level of the bureaucracy, who are not very well versed with statistics or data collection. So how do we better collect data? And how can we give better access to citizens? One of your examples about JPEG being pasted in next data. How can we give better access to citizens to data? Thank you.
Great question. So one of the things that solutions that has been proposed that people are attempting is now an app for everything. Right? So there has been a suggestion that Apple or Dasha for everything should be enabling those on apps. And the feeling that will make everything happens much faster, even new services, they say it's going to be digital services. We need to be very clear about what we are solving and how much more work we are giving to extremely poor paid people. So a big part of the, understanding the process of training of enumerators is actually quite, humbling to realize, for example, both the NHS and the NSS, the training that enumerators go through. So on those counts, the big survey that we I think training is quite robust. So the improvements will be pretty good. Improving pay, better oversight, all of these will come important. But just as an example, there was often a sense that patching of administrative data and with schema maybe from the ICDs was happening from Anganwadi workers, and they were pretending to Ashas, who would pretend to, who would say that they gone and delivered, we not actually do it. So there's an ongoing study that's being conducted by some people in the few states where they try to check that where the data is gone wrong, what level is gone wrong. And they've actually found that it wasn't at the case, it's happening a good few levels higher than that. So, one is just about better training and better enumeration. The other is about actually identifying where things are going wrong and for what reason. Are there incentives for it to go purposefully wrong, or are there just difficulties at that level? And yes, I do, even I don't think that people should be burdened with the more apps and devices. But the current process where things start on paper, go into a Google Sheet, and then come back as paper, physical reports, is really very suboptimal. So to answer both of your questions, I do think that improving the digitization of data collection is important without burdening the people in actual collection. And in terms of better data access, machine readable data is what anybody working with data would want. So not PDFs, not images, but CSVs. And in most cases, there is no good reason that it's not data that it's not very big. It's just in Bombay, for example, in the city of Bombay, in the pandemic was coming up with a fantastic city level. And they would, it was a PDF that would fresh, update itself every day. So there was no way to build a historical thing except if you remember at 7 o'clock every day, you do a screen capture or something, even time will change. And when I asked them, can you just, clearly what happens to the data? You don't need an image of it, just give it. They said, no, I said, put it on your website, go down. No, we don't need so much available. So I mean, there was no attempt to hide it. The graph was being given. But that culture of let's make data available in accessible form hasn't yet come about. Perhaps in the past there weren't that many people working with the data. But now there certainly is a way to data community. So putting things in CSV and machine readable format really is what I would envision.
Take two more questions before we. Yes.
We talk a little bit about the darker side of collecting all of this data and like sharing all of this quite openly, right? Like how much of it is and what is like the data privacy standards?
No, that's that's something that I almost don't have an answer for it. I'll just explain a little of what I mean. So yes, the security and privacy of data is a massive issue and not to be dismissed lightly and should be central to all of these discussions. And we know it's not just something to worry about the conspiracy theory. We know now this is actually happening. The huge need for localized information and we know was distributed and available is truly valuable. We see frequent data breaches that are never acknowledged, the security of our data is completely unknown. And it places all of these discussions in a bit of the impacts that I have this solution. So for example, during the pandemic, there was talk of national health ID, and there was huge pushback from many groups against it. Now, at some point in the pandemic, early on, when the vaccine started coming on, we knew from the UK that there was good, the vaccine effectiveness was good of the AstraZeneca that was commonly available here. Why do we know that? They were able to trace people right from with the same NHS National Health Service ID from when they got tested to whether they got hospitalized or not, to whether they died or not, and whether they had been vaccinated. That whole thing, you had to give your NHS ID to know. And we simply could not do that in India because to get tested, you would give one ID, to get vaccinated, you would give another ID. Linkages were happening over phone numbers, which as we all know, we book vaccine appointments for 20 people in our household with the same phone number. So, what a terrible idea that would be. And on the basis of that, vaccine effectiveness data that is completely spurious was being produced in India. So, my immediate sort of envy was that if we had a national ID, or perhaps even if Aadhaar was mandatory for all these steps, we would have been able to do this and we would have had it. Now, of course, it's an argument that cannot be made in a vacuum, but pretending that was privacy doesn't exist, but pretending that that same Aadhaar ID will not be used by the police to go after someone from a minority religion. So it places us at an impasse, and I understand people who say, yes, let's abandon dreams of getting a technically advanced, but reducing these sort of numbers, still we can assure privacy. Someone like me who's interested in the data might almost be tempted to go the other way around, but that's clearly the wrong way to do it. So yes, it does place us at a bit of an impasse about technical solutions for it. Still we can show the protections and what those protections should look like and what sort of legal backing it means. I'm not very clear.
Great talk. Extra analytical sciences, extra, and we actually use data, some of the data that we over. So one of the things I realized when I try to access data is that, as you mentioned, it's not often deliberate attempts at having data. It's sometimes just being mistaken. The person is collecting the data has no idea what's going to be used for, so have no motivation in some sense. And there's this humorous thing that we once noticed that if you look at the delivery of numbers for India, there's one particular state where for 10 successive years, the number of milligrams is exactly the same. So it leads you to believe that someone was just increasing and the thing is that since because there's no once you have all the data together, when year by year this person is sending the data, nobody actually knows you, nobody is actually comparing what happened in the past. So sometimes it's a benign negligence. The other factor I noticed was that most of the time the person is giving the data, it's a mental photograph. And this is great. What if this comes back to all of this? So this actually happened to us that in 2009 when the H1N1 was going on. This was actually the first attempt by the Ministry of Health Family Welfare to get statisticians to analyze the data and like project like how many cases might there be and so on. So we were given this data and they said that 70s there's no study also with this data open there. It's the MOHFW website which actually is available. So once we analyze this data, we said that we'd like to write a paper out and we'll be happy to make you co-authors. At this point, we suddenly, there was this hushed silence and then said, you can't do that. And so then when I was, why can't you do that? I said, what do you see something people which the minister kind of pulls up and then someone asks a question in parliament and then our jobs will be on the line. So I realized that most of the time is this fear that if I make it available, it will somehow come back to bite me. So I don't know how to get around that. I'm explaining several times to these people, but I can see that. So I mean, I don't know whether you have to talk about how to get around this fear so that they are not that we share data.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I very much think that I've encountered, and my answer would be that in my mind, the solution is for the incentives to be created such that these are not individual error decisions. There has to be institutional decisions around how this data is shared. So, however we all come together, we are able to say that on these indicators at this interval, this data will be made available. That is the and I actually, feel that overall, institutionally, they're causing, some researchers are causing harm to the broader ecosystem by developing these special individual regulations. So, as you know, in the pandemic, ICMR data was very difficult to get, and 100 leading Indian scientists wrote to India asking for the data to be available. Similarly, detailed seroprevalence data is not available in many states. Many researchers struck deals with individual governments and others to get that data, and then they make it available or they get or something like that. So I understand they need to publish that is there, and that's what's relevant. And it is the pursuit of knowledge. I'm not saying that there are various goals. So what does it do institutionally? Why have we not been able to? How wouldn't it have been better to be able to say, let's do this, let's publish, and now you make this data available on your website and make a commitment that you will make it available at these employees. So my job also is usually convincing individuals to share data, and it cannot be the way. It cannot be the way we progress. That cannot be. It has to be institutional. Otherwise, it will be people of privilege who get that data. Someone who is less well known or will not get the data from the same person. We just that is very undemocratic. So and the fear too, if the way it goes away is by moving that you have overall institutional tracking. So the Office of National Statistics in the UK produces excess mortality numbers every week. Now, what those excess mortality numbers show is that the UK government has not counted on COVID deaths. Every week they produce these numbers. Now, that you can produce it without any fear of the job. So, to me, the answer has to be institutional.
I pronounced from IIT Madras, and from anthropology background. We mainly rely on qualitative data, very limited quantitative data. Looking at this, the government data, the question is how much we can trust on this data. If you want to use the data, what are the backgrounds you have to do to make sense for this large numbers?
Yes, thank you. And I think that's broadly something that I would like to share with students as well. The good part about most large Indian data sets is that they are widely discussed in published work. So before deciding to use a big data set, we would have a conversation with someone, but it can be equally done by reading up around there about the gaps in that data. Do not use NFHS for migration. It is something that migration specialists, children who face any understanding and experience as written about and would mention. So if I am doing to write about migration and I'm just doing about search, I will look at NFHS also how should I use it. Reading more broadly about it would be the way to go. Because, and this sympathizes with the first point that we made about trust. The gaps in the data typically do not come from official Indian statistics, do not come from willful manipulation of those numbers, but from things that the numbers missed for reasons that are usually quite relevant. So some of it comes later, so we all use the census for several years after it comes out. And then last year, an excellent book by two researchers at Cambridge University, Vikas Kumar and Pushakar came out about Nagaland in particular, which looks at census and SSO and looks at how much the census gets wrong about Nagaland and for what reason that is. Now, at the time, it came out, we would have already used that data trusting in. But then in hindsight, we learned some of these things about it, and that's sort of aggregates to broad shared knowledge about what data sets can be used and how. I do accept though that this knowledge is not widely and easily available. So to someone who feels that I want to look at consumption data, when you look at what are the most easy sources, I mean, where all are you really figure whether you use it or not? So part of my work going forward is also to try to make data more accessible and also make the process behind it easier to understand and make the selection of measures and indicators more transparent. Don't use this data because everybody says you should use it for all these reasons, by the idea. So, I acknowledge that at the moment this is not widely available information. Broadly, using large vetted government data sets that conform to international standards, which is all of our census, NHS, NFHS, NSS, so all conform to international standards. I would broadly tell you this.
So,
I'm going to be that makes a comment rather than ask a question. Recently I did a piece about the environmental government education program. And just to share how fantastically the data collection works. Just for context, it's an intervention for classes 1 to 3 in primary school government schools around the state to bring kids up to speed for the 2 years they lost during the pandemic. And right from the beginning, everything is digitized. So every primary school teacher, this sort of links to what the person asked about the data collection. Everyone has an app in which they feed in right from attendance to evaluation. So every Friday, the teacher brings the kids over one by one to make them answer questions that feeds into the app. And from where the headmaster is sitting, she can actually see how the school is running based on this app. And they also have a Telegram support group for all the teachers across the state to communicate if there's a breakdown of any kind of problem with the material. And every month from the region, from the district, they all get together. So this app also throws up evaluations. So we rank schools based on how the kids are doing. And this is motivating teachers to work harder to get the first rank on for the next thing. It seemed like a really fantastic way of putting down from day one how the kids are faring. But the backstory to this, which was really interesting, was before this was launched, something like 27 lakh children across the state were evaluated to put them into these 3 categories, which is class 1, 2, and 3. And so there are a lot of classrooms with mixed levels as well. So it helped even teachers know where the problem areas were. So this is something that as a good example of how data is collected.
Yeah, and just one point I want to take away, it's to your point as well. Just the final thing. Doing fixes post facto is almost impossible. So the best way to get in place any improvements is to get it on the ground and have it as part of whatever you're doing forward. So one great example is the PMGSY National Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana scheme, where very early on the decision was taken to have GIS mapping, and so there's a great open data set available. But yeah, fitting any evaluation after it's over is very difficult, which just gives us incentive for what to do going forward.
I would like to ask the last question. This is about the concept of census. The delay in census is happening, but delimitation exercises also happen. How do we look at this democratic?
We save the hardest for last. Yeah, the justification for doing exercises based off the census without having a new census is on very shaky grounds. If you're going to have a delayed census, but insists that everything else that's based off that census continues to happen, you're guaranteeing, wrong answers. So, it's I would say at the moment it's up to the constituencies, and I don't even those constituencies, but the groups affected by this to put down and say that any process that's been determined by the baseline that is now 20 years old, on the understanding that it would be based on a newer baseline, it just seems unacceptable. So, just to broaden the democratic deficit point a bit further, I do think that there's a reason for all of us to think about why this hasn't become a regulation. What is it that has to do in our communication, in civil society, in political parties, that all of this around data has not become a much bigger issue. So I don't think there's Taking some introspection of them.
Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for joining us this evening. Thank you.